Hello everyone and welcome to another very nice game from the quarterfinals of the FIDE 2019 World Cup. It's Teimour Radjabov versus Jeffery Xiong. This is their second game of the match, the classical one. First game ended in a draw where Xiong had the white pieces, so it will be very interesting how he will fare with the black pieces against Radjabov. We do have a nice photo of the matchup, not from this round, it's from the previous round, but we use what we have. Photo courtesy of Kirill Merkuriev, official photographer of the 2019 FIDE World Cup. So there you have it, just to get in the mood for the game. Now let's check it out. With the white pieces, Radjabov opens with d4 and knight to f6 with c4, and now we don't go into something that will go into the Queen's Gambit decline, but rather g6. With knight to c3 and now d5, the Gruenfeld defense is on the board. With c captures, knight captures, and e4, we go into the main line of the Gruenfeld. Knight captures on c3, b captures, and bishop to g7. Bishop to c4, the main line, the most popular line here, but bishop to b5 by Radjabov. A somewhat rarer line, with c6 blocking check, and now bishop back to a4. With castles, and now knight to e2. Nakamura also enjoys playing this bishop to b5 line, with e5 by black. Now the white king is still in the center. Of course, black wouldn't mind busting open the center, and the problem with, for example, something like d5, d5 is met with queen to h4, just going after the e4 pawn, and if you defend it, for example, knight g3, then the rook assumes the d file, and now white will have some problems. So after e5, Radjabov just castles, and now knight to d7. Continuing development with bishop to e3, queen to e7, and now bishop back to c2. With knight to b6, and now there is one game that reached this position, Vlastimil Janša versus Valentin Sorokin in 2006, where queen to c1 was played preparing f4, but here Radjabov says preparing is for weaklings, I'm just going to push f4 right away. And it is as of move 13 with f4 that we have a completely new game. So, Xiong captures with e captures on d4, and now bishop captures on d4, offering a trade of dark square bishops. Most of the times you want to do this, as black's dragon is his strongest piece, so you do want to trade it. Rook to d8. It seems like white will have some problems here, as the bishop is on the same file as the queen, and if c5 comes, it seems like you're going to lose a piece here. But Radjabov continues with the attack. He plays f5. And what does this mean? Is c5 just winning a piece? Well, not really. If you play c5, then Radjabov had f6 in mind, with an attack on the queen and the bishop. Now, after you move the queen, you can continue e5, further harassing the queen c7, and now f captures on g7. C captures on d4, and now as the f file is opened up for the white rook, bishop to b3, going after the f7 pawn. Bishop to e6 defending, and now you just recapture c captures on d4, and the white has an incredible position here. So after f5, of course, Jeffery did not go for c5. He played bishop captures on d4 with check, with c captures on d4, and now c5, going after the center. Queen to d2, preparing something like f6, maybe queen to h6. It's still not anything serious, as the queen always has the retreat square of f8, and you will be able to counter white queen on h6. But now Xiong goes after the white queen with knight to c4, attacking the queen. Queen to d3, getting out of the way, and now knight to e5, going after the queen yet again. And here, queen to a3, now saying that, okay, your knight is under attack and you cannot capture here, since your queen would be hanging on e7. So knight back to c4, attacking the queen, and now here Xiong says, okay, you can grab my c5 pawn if you want, but it's not a good move. For example, queen captures, pawn captures, and now you get knight to e3, and the white has to give up a rook, because if you try to defend both the rook and the bishop, then you get rook d2, and now you either lose the piece here or you lose the piece here. There's no way to defend both. So, Radjabov decides, okay, we're not capturing here, let's just retreat. Queen back to c3 now, and here we have b5, as there are no more squares where you can attack the queen, so you just defend the knight. With f6, attacking the queen, and now queen to d6. It's always important to keep an eye on that f8 square. For now, the knight covers e3 and d2, so you cannot go over to h6 right away, but, you can never be too careful. And now d5, not allowing this capture to happen, and it's a somewhat weird pawn structure in the center, but if you can get rook ad1 in, maybe push this pawn to e5 somehow, then the central pawn structure would be very nice. With rook to e8 by Xiong, and now bishop to d3, hoping to capture the knight here. And here, knight b6 is one way to do it. For example, you give up the b5 pawn, and in exchange, black grabs the e4 pawn, reducing white's center somewhat. But Xiong decided to go for knight to e3. It's similar, but not quite. Here, Radjabov played bishop captures on b5 with rook captures on e4. Now the knight is defended, and now knight to g3. And here's where the party really starts. So how do you do this? Do you capture the rook and give up your own rook? It's a very interesting line. But the problem is if you capture on f1, yes, you keep an eye on the h2 pawn. So now if white captures here, you can capture on h2 with the queen. But then the problem is white just recaptures and you're down a piece. And you don't have good compensation for it. Your pieces are undeveloped and you have no way of continuing the attack. Queen h1 doesn't really do anything as the white queen guards the rook on a1. So after knight to g3, we don't have knight captures on f1, but rather knight to g4, an excellent attacking move. Now, of course, if Radjabov captures the rook, it's queen captures on h2 with checkmate. So after knight to g4, we have rook a to c1, going after the c5 pawn, and here Jeffery just pushes it, c4. Trying to buy some time. For example, if bishop captures, then he can play h5, h4, and so on. Maybe dislodge this knight and continue the attack. But Radjabov is not interested. He plays h3. He says, okay, you move the knight, I just capture your rook on e4. So everything is good. Xiong goes bishop to b7, now with the idea of creating some threats here. He gives up the knight on g4, but it's actually a very nice sacrifice. Radjabov accepts it with pawn captures on g4, and now rook captures on g4 with a double attack on the knight, and things get really complicated here. Another move other than rook captures on g4, queen to c5 check was possible, as it goes after the bishop on b5 right away. If you're eager to win your piece back right away. For example, rook f2. Now you go rook f4, go after the rook, and only after you trade rooks, let's say rook f1, rook captures, then you recapture on b5. But Xiong is not in a hurry to win his sacrificed piece. He just plays rook captures on g4, as he's such a great attacker. And now again, what do you play here? How do you defend the knight? It's not simple. If you play knight e2, just get the knight out of the way, then you get queen captures on d5. Now you have all these threats on g2. It will be impossible to defend. So black would be, of course, winning here. And on the other hand, if you try to defend it, it is possible to go rook to f3. Just defend it, give up the d5 pawn, your rook is under attack, you move the rook. Then comes queen e3 with an attack on the bishop, pressuring the rook. So now rook captures here is rook captures knight is a threat as the rook is pinned. So here, white, not the greatest continuation for white. So here, Radjabov finds the best idea, bishop to c6. Give up the g3 knight, but for some excellent play. With rook captures on g3, now comes queen captures on c4. And of course, Xiong is not interested in giving Radjabov this very strong passed c-pawn, so he plays a very tricky move. He doesn't go for rook to c8. Rook to c8 is one way to do it, but as both of them are really low on time, it's every second is valuable. He plays bishop to a6, and bishop to a6 just shows you how creative Xiong is. It's really just a crazy, what sorcery is this move. The thing is, if you capture the bishop, it's very hard to spot black's idea. For example, if the bishop is captured, then Xiong's idea is rook to h3. The point is, if you capture the rook, then of course it's a draw by perpetual checking, king h1, queen captures, king goes here, queen captures, and so on. On the other hand, after this rook to h3 move, if you don't capture it, it's hard to find a good continuation because queen to h2 is coming. So white is better here, but when both of them are very low on time, it's impossible to allow such a continuation for black. You would have to find queen to c4, and it's a very hard move to find. You have to allow all of these checks: queen h2 check, king f2, queen g3 check. Now if you go back, it's just a draw by repetition, so you have to go further up the board. You cannot go rook e8 check as the bishop covers d8 square. But you can go rook h2, now threaten to capture here, but then white plays d6, and now you see that the bishop guards the g2 pawn. So it's not incredibly difficult to find, but with little time on the clock, you do not want to risk this. So after bishop to a6, Radjabov instead goes queen to f4. So you cannot capture the rook now because queen captures queen. Radjabov wants to trade queens with rook to d8. Now, again, Xiong does not have a problem trading queens. But first we have rook c to e1. Now threatening some very nasty ideas. Queen to h6 is not a problem. Radjabov could force a queen trade here. Queen to f8 just goes back, captures, rook fe1, getting the rook out of the way. But he prefers rook c to e1. Now the thing is, of course, if you play something like queen captures here, it's not going to be all that great. And especially if you play bishop captures on f1, that could be very bad, because queen captures on d6, rook captures, and now the real idea behind rook to e1 is just rook to e8 mate. So after rook c to e1, we have queen to c5 with check and rook to f2 blocking. And now rook to c3. Your rook is still hanging here, so you have to bring it back. Ding was having an interview. He was also commentating on this game because his game with Alexander Grishuk finished before this game, and he showed a very funny line, so I'm just going to show it. What happens if queen to c3, just defending the rook this way and attacking the rook here, abandoning your, defense of the f8 square, and he now showed if queen to h6, then you get queen captures on e1 with check, and if king to h2, now it seems like you're getting checkmated, but you're actually not because of rook to h3 check. And now you either have to bring the queen back, and then black just grabs the pawn here. You could grab with the rook, with the king, then you get just queen to h1 check, king g3, and you lose the queen on h6. Or after rook to h3, you could capture with the g pawn, but then you get queen captures on f2 with check, king h1, and now queen captures this pawn, so there is no mate, and now you are just up a whole rook. So really very nice of Dingo for showing us this funny line after winning his game against Grishuk. But okay, in the game, rook to c3 by Xiong, and now comes a move that that's actually a very nice move. So we already said that queen to h6 followed by queen to g7 mate is what this game is all about. This is what Radjabov went for when he played f5 and f6. But the constant problem is that Xiong's queen is covering the f8 square, so the g7 square will always be protected. So here we have rook to e7. Just queen to h6, again, also possible. You could go for this and go for the queen trade, but Radjabov finds rook to e7. Now the queen can no longer go to f8 to block mate, and there is only one good continuation that that saves the game for Xiong. So pause the video here and try to find this defensive idea. Maybe we can do this a bit more often, pausing the video to find defensive ideas as well. Well, I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on defending such a difficult position to defend. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, the only good move is rook to c2. Now you have this very nice pin. You just attack the pinned piece. Now of course queen to h6 is nothing because you just get mated. Queen captures rook, king h1, queen captures, and g2 is mate. So rook to c2 really creates problems for white. You will not be able to continue with your attack. You will have to go back, for example, queen e3, offer a queen trade, and then the game continues. But Xiong did not find rook to c2. Xiong played rook to c1 check. We have king to h2, and now rook back to c3. Probably with the idea that after queen to h6, he can deliver some checks and then go rook to c1, maybe continue checking the white king. The problem is it doesn't work. So here, I'm not going to even ask you to pause the video, as we already discussed that the main theme of the game is queen to h6. So here in this position, Radjabov just played queen to h6, and it was in this position on move 36 that Jeffery Xiong resigned the game, as there is nothing more to do here. He saw that after this check, for example, you could deliver queen to d6 check, but now the problem is the king will not go back, allowing rook to c1 or something, but just rook to f4. You block check, and next move it's queen to g7 checkmate. And there are no more tricks, there are no more checks, there is nothing black can do this to even hope you know, to save this game. So yeah, definitely a very interesting game, a tough game, really a wonderful attacking game by both of them. Jeffery really showed, you know, some really interesting and tricky lines, especially that bishop to a6 move, definitely my favorite move of the game. But it was not enough. Radjabov takes him down, and with this game, Xiong is eliminated from the FIDE World Cup 2019, where Teimour Radjabov advances. So Radjabov and Ding are the two semi-finalists now, and we will have to wait and see what the other players will do tomorrow in the rapid section. So yeah, once again, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Pavel Rotnagel, Abdullah Jabara, and Raul Wasserman for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. I would also just like to mention that Abdullah Jabara created sort of an agadmator chess club on chess.com. I will put a link to it in the description below. It will be the first thing you will see. So if you want to join his club, if you play on chess.com, feel free to join his chess club. And, you know, have some fun and enjoy some tournaments. But yeah, as usual, you can check two of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, covering more of the games of the FIDE World Cup 2019 and checking up on your wonderful suggestions. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.